Darkness wasn't the worst part. Pain had texture, sound, even scent. Captain Elias Rourke couldn't see much through the blood and bruised eyelids, but he didn't need sight to know where he was. The Empire's interrogators had a signature, clinical sterility wrapped in sadism. The room smelled like ammonia, ozone, and death. Cold air hissed in steady intervals, a reminder that he was breathing their recycled air now. He hung from steel restraints, arms stretched behind his back at a deliberate angle designed to dislocate over time. Joints screamed. Skin cracked. Yet the worst damage was deeper. Nerve shredders, flickering blue filaments, spiraled around his spine and temples. They hadn't even asked a question yet. Footsteps echoed. Slow. Confident. Overlord Kothael Drossik emerged from the shadows like a painting come to life, 7 feet tall, violet armor adorned with pulsating runes, his translucent facial plates rippling as if water moved beneath his skin. "I expected more from a human," Kothael said, his voice calm, oily. "You've been here, 46 standard hours. You haven't screamed once." Rourke smiled through broken lips. "You must be bad at your job." Kothael nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps. But I never fail. You'll tell me where the Null Protocol lives. The technology that lets your kind cheat death. It's real, isn't it?" Rourke didn't answer. Blood dripped from his mouth onto the polished floor. Kothael raised a finger. The nerve shredders hummed louder. Then they bit. Every synapse in Rourke's body lit up at once. He didn't scream, his body just seized, muscles locking, tendons straining. Veins bulged in his neck. 10 seconds. 20. The hum stopped. Rourke sagged in his restraints, wheezing. "Where is the Null Protocol?" Kothael repeated. Rourke coughed, a mix of blood and spit hitting the Overlord's boots. "Inside your mother," he rasped. Kothael didn't react. He simply turned and gestured. A nearby tech adjusted a dial. A fresh jolt surged through the shredders. Rourke's body convulsed again, this time harder. His shoulder popped, then his right knee twisted unnaturally. "You're dying, human," Kothael murmured. "Even now your organs fail. Your liver has shut down. Your heart will follow. You will break." "No," Rourke managed. "You will." Kothael tilted his head. "Why is it always the humans who say such things before they die?" He stepped closer, lowered his voice. "You're not special. You bleed. You beg. You rot. And after this, your earth will burn just the same." Rourke's vision narrowed. A ringing in his ears built into a deafening crescendo. Every heartbeat grew weaker. The last thing he saw was Kothael's sneer as he turned away. "Time of death, 3:27 Galactic Mean Time," the tech confirmed. The restraints clicked open. Rourke's corpse slumped onto a hovering gurney. The guards didn't bother securing it. Why would they? He was just meat now. The door sealed behind them. Silence returned. 40 minutes later, something moved. First, a twitch. A spark of black electricity laced through a neural implant at the base of Rourke's skull. Nanites surged, activating protocols buried beneath memory, fear, and pain. Rebooting primary systems. Null protocol initiated. Bones reset with nauseating pops. Muscles reknit. Blood vessels stitched themselves. His eyes opened, milky white, before flickering back to life. He gasped. Sat upright. Then remained still. This wasn't resurrection. It wasn't healing. It was something else. Something deeper. He looked down at his arms, veins glowing faintly with black circuitry. His pulse was steady. Too steady. Inside his head, a voice echoed, calm, synthetic. "Vital signs stabilized. Phase 1 complete. You are operational." He slid off the slab, bare feet touching the cold floor. He wasn't detected. No alarms. Cameras above him didn't move. Rourke moved through the chamber like a shadow, observing his reflection in a metallic wall. He looked different. Paler. Eyes too sharp. His thoughts clearer than they'd ever been. No protocol had worked. But it hadn't come without cost. He wasn't alone inside his head. Memory fragments hit him like static. His team dying on Icarus Ridge. Burning cities. A voice. If you activate, complete the mission. No matter the condition. He pressed his palm against the wall. A faint shimmer passed through his skin, a signal hijack. Internal Empire maps flowed into his vision. He saw the entire prison layout, security zones, access codes. He smiled. He didn't need revenge. He was revenge. 2 guards entered the autopsy chamber minutes later, laughing. Another meatbag processed, one said, flicking through a hollow pad. Bet the overlords already filed the trophy claim. They didn't see the figure behind them. They didn't hear the scalpel slide from the tray. Rourke's hand was steady. Precise. 1 slash to the throat. Another to the base of the spine. The second guard dropped before he could scream. Rourke dragged the bodies into a cold locker. Dressed in one of their uniforms. He stepped into the corridor unnoticed. No sensors beeped. No scans flagged him. The facility still thought he was dead. That was their first mistake. He passed a terminal. His fingers tapped quickly. A message appeared on every hallway wall. You killed me. I'm returning the favor. He erased the logs and walked deeper into the fortress. His heart didn't beat like it used to. But it would be more than enough. The corridor was dim, silent, and sterile, until the lights flickered for just a moment. Rourke pressed himself against the wall, unmoving. Even the hum of the environmental system paused, as if the fortress itself held its breath. Then it resumed. He exhaled slowly and kept moving. He wore the guard's armor now, loose at the shoulders, but functional. Helmet tucked under one arm, just in case. His face was still bruised, though the swelling had vanished. The nanites hadn't repaired everything. Some wounds, he suspected, weren't meant to be healed. Phase 2 operational. The synthetic voice whispered in his mind. Cognitive mapping at 94%. Full stealth integration achieved. He ignored the status update. The voice wasn't quite AI, more like a reflex, something hardwired into his nervous system. Useful, but unnerving. A pair of patrols passed him down the hall. Mather glanced twice. The sensors didn't blink. They couldn't see what didn't officially exist. According to every system in this place, Elias Rourke was dead. That was the advantage. That was the horror. He made it to a utility shaft and climbed into the tight vertical column. Every muscle worked silently. The nanites responded without conscious thought, adjusting grip pressure, boosting circulation, reinforcing ligaments where necessary. Like he was part machine, but not fully. At the top, a maintenance access led to the command level's lower ventilation path. He slid in, knees scraping alloy. Cold air rushed over him. In the distance, he heard the low rumble of engines, the occasional footsteps of patrolling enforcers. He stopped at a vent overlooking a security control room. 3 Thalcari officers monitored prisoner data streams, chatting idly in their own guttural language. You see the way he died? One of them muttered, voice translated in Rourke's neural implant. Flayers practically liquefied his brain. Didn't even scream in the end. Impressive for a human. Another grunted. All that drama over nothing. Still no signs of this null protocol Cothale keeps ranting about. Rourke studied the screens behind them. No image of him. No alert. No active record beyond the flatline timestamp logged hours ago. He couldn't stay here. But he'd learned something vital. The Empire didn't just kill him. They dismissed him. As if that was enough. They had no idea what was coming. He moved on. The route took him past the old quarantine wing, decommissioned, left in ruin. Fewer cameras. No guards. Perfect for what he needed. Inside, he found a silent chamber lined with dusty medical pods. He dragged one open, ripped the old display system out, and connected a stolen wrist comp to the power port. It hissed, sparked, and came to life. The interface was primitive, but enough to start a data stream breach. Empire encryption flowed in cascading glyphs. Rourke's fingers moved without thinking, guided by his training, and something deeper. The nanites augmented his pattern recognition, giving him intuition at machine speed. One by one, the prison's data logs opened to him. He found them. 13 humans. Black Ops agents. All dead. All captured and processed here before vanishing from history. Their deaths hadn't been recorded in any galactic court. No formal execution. Just silence. He stared at their names. Names he knew. A few were friends. Others legends. And now him. 14th on the list. The chamber's quiet buzz was broken by a dry whisper. "You weren't supposed to die like that, Elias," a voice said. He turned, fists clenched, but no one was there. The whisper again, feminine, calm, familiar. "I told you the protocol would work. But not what it would cost." He blinked. Saw her for just a second, Commander Lyra Nevis. Dead 3 years. Smiling in that same maddening way she always had before dropping hell on a battlefield. Then gone. Like mist in the dark. Rourke steadied himself. Side effect. The voice in his skull noted clinically. Neural echoes during resynchronization. Hallucinations expected. He muttered to no one. "What am I now?" "Still you," the system replied. "But not who you were." He shut the console down, yanked the drive out, and torched the terminal with a short burst from a stolen plasma pin. No data left behind. Nothing to trace. Back in the hallways, the mood had shifted. Subtly. More patrols. Faster footfalls. Rumors traveling faster than orders. Guards speaking in low tones, checking corners they never used to check. Rourke had left his mark. And they'd noticed. A guard passed him without a word, until he stopped, turned back, squinting. "You," the alien said, unsure. "You're not." Rourke moved first. A quick sidestep, hand to the guard's throat, knife sliding between vertebrae with clinical ease. The body slumped soundlessly. He dragged it behind a column. Took the comms unit. Tuned in. "Unconfirmed anomalies in Sector 3. Surveillance blackout across Hallway C. Warden has ordered lockdown drill." "Good. Let them be afraid." He returned to the ventilation shafts and crawled toward the command balcony. From there, Cothail's private tower would be within reach. Not yet for confrontation, but close enough to watch. To remind him. A whisper of boots on metal. A shadow darting beneath a flickering light. The cameras rolled on, blind. At the heart of the Empire's most feared prison, death had come back to life. And it was hunting. Cothail stood before a display of grainy holofeeds, arms folded behind his back, tail twitching. The room was quiet, save for the clicking of his claws on metal as he shifted weight. His officers watched from the edges of the chamber, nervous and silent. "Play it again," he ordered. The feed looped, a hallway empty. Then, flicker, 2 guards pass through. One glances sideways, then stiffens. The footage cuts out for half a second. When it returns, both guards are gone. No sound. No trace. Cothail narrowed his eyes. Enhanced the static. A tech adjusted filters. The image sharpened. For the briefest moment, a blurred silhouette appeared, a man. Then nothing. "Impossible," Cothail muttered. He turned from the display, walking to the observation window. Below, guards rushed through the fortress, weapons drawn, shouting into comms. Order had broken. Protocols had failed. All because of one man. He thought he had killed him. Watched him die. Ordered the gurney rolled away with a sneer. And yet. He looked out into the burning gloom and said nothing. Rourke crouched in the ceiling rafters above an engine substation, watching 3 engineers scramble to fix the power junction he had sabotaged 30 minutes earlier. The delay had caused several security doors to malfunction, exactly as planned. He needed access to the central elevator that ran to Cothail's tower. Too heavily guarded from the front. But a back door existed, locked behind a maintenance panel only accessible if 3 specific failsafes were tripped simultaneously. He had already tripped 2. The third required a manual override from the comms relay. he whispered. Route me the top-level access codes. The voice inside his mind responded instantly. Overlay complete. Proceed down shaft Gamma 12. 2 hostiles ahead. 1 armed with plasma repeater. 1 unarmed. He moved without hesitation. The hallway beyond the station was low-lit, full of exposed piping and humming cores. As predicted, 2 guards loitered. They didn't even raise their weapons before Rourke hit the first one, striking low, snapping the alien's knee, and dragging him into a chokehold. The second shouted, reached for his weapon. Too slow. Rourke threw the body into him, knocked him off balance, then stepped in and drove a metal shard into the creature's neck. It twitched, fell. No gunfire. No alarms. He stripped their access cards, climbed the ladder, and reached the relay. Inside, the terminal blinked, Level 3 clearance required. He inserted the card, hacked the sequence, and tapped the command that unlocked the elevator override. 3 seconds later, the lights across the prison flickered. Doors sealed. Power rerouted. A synthetic voice rang out across the halls. Lockdown protocol, Delta. Perfect. Cathael watched the fortress descend into controlled panic. The security net is compromised, the head technician said, voice tight. Whoever this is, they're inside our system. Then purge the system, Cathael snapped. That would disable all autolocks, pressure shields, and containment grids. Cathael turned slowly. You think you still control this facility? The technician hesitated. Do it, Cathael growled. The tech nodded and ran. Cathael stepped back to the feed. For a split second, he saw it again. A human silhouette in the dark, halfway between the substation and the tower shaft. Only visible through a motion glitch. He clenched his fist. You died, he said quietly. I watched you die. Then why was he afraid? Rourke dropped into the tower base and rolled silently into a storage alcove. The room was empty, clean, ornate, the walls trimmed in gold-laced alloy, an absurd luxury for a place of torture. He scanned the hallway. No guards. No motion. But he didn't trust it. He never trusted empty corridors. They were too easy. Then the lights shifted. Motion sensors snapped into place. The tower's private AI reinitialized. A mechanical voice announced. Overlord Cathael, security breach proximity alert. So much for stealth. The floor beneath him shifted. He jumped just as a section of the wall peeled back, revealing a mounted turret. It charged. He dove behind a statue, plasma bolts slicing the air where his head had been. Activate countermeasures, he said. Nanite projection deployed. Decoy in play. A shimmer danced from Rourke's skin, forming a translucent copy of himself that sprinted into the corridor. The turret turned, fired, tracked. Rourke moved the opposite direction, using the distraction to reach the lift. Inside, the controls blinked. He slammed the override drive into the slot and initiated an express ascent. The elevator rose in silence. His mind wasn't. He saw her again, Lyra. Standing beside him in their old dropship. No blood. No wounds. Just watching him with that knowing stare. You're not supposed to be alive, she said. I'm not. She stepped closer. Then why are you still here? He didn't have an answer. The image vanished as the doors opened. Cathael stood at the far end of the chamber, alone, facing a grand window overlooking the prison. I was hoping it was a ghost, he said without turning. But no, ghosts don't bleed. Rourke stepped forward. You sure about that? Cathael turned. His eyes narrowed. What did they do to you? You did it, Rourke said. You broke the last human who gave a damn about mercy. He drew a short blade from his waist. Not elegant. Not ceremonial. Just functional. Sharp. Cathael bared his teeth. You should have stayed dead. Rourke lunged. The duel began. Cathael's blade snapped from his wrist in a hiss of molten alloy. Serrated edges pulsed with purple light as he stepped forward, posture upright, movements fluid. Not rushed. Controlled. Rourke struck first. His blade moved low, silent, direct. Cothail blocked with a twist, deflecting the blow with ease. They circled each other, the Overlord's massive form graceful despite its bulk. Rourke stayed low, breathing steady, eyes unblinking. "You're not like the others," Cothail said, parrying another slash. They begged. "You came back." Rourke ducked beneath a sweeping strike and slashed upward, drawing a shallow line across Cothail's ribs. "Different protocol," he said flatly. Cothail grunted. "The Null Protocol. You remember it now. I remember killing you. You remember wrong." Cothail advanced, pushing Rourke back with a barrage of heavy strikes. The Overlord fought with calculated strength, precision over brute force. Rourke absorbed each clash, adjusting his angles, letting the nanites anticipate motion fractions of a second before it happened. Cothail lunged. Rourke caught the edge of the blade across his shoulder, the heat searing his skin. He rolled away, pivoted, and drove his boot into Cothail's knee. A satisfying crack echoed. The Overlord stumbled. Rourke didn't press. He waited. The floor beneath them rumbled. The tower's power grid, damaged by the earlier sabotage, overloaded. Light strobed. The wall displays flickered, spitting static. Rourke glanced at the feeds, prison sectors burning, riots breaking out in containment wings, security teams overrun. The entire fortress was unraveling. "You think this chaos means you've won?" Cothail snarled, straightening. "I think you lost the moment you buried me," Rourke answered. Cothail lunged again, faster this time. His strikes were wide now, heavier, desperate. Rourke sidestepped, weaving under a high arc, then slamming his knife into Cothail's thigh. Sparks and blood burst from the wound. Cothail roared and grabbed him with both hands, hurling him across the chamber. Rourke hit a column hard, ribs cracking. He hit the floor, groaning, coughing blood. "You're not a man," Cothail growled, limping toward him. "You're a broken tool clinging to rage." Rourke pushed to his feet. "You're right." He activated the shard on his belt, a high-frequency pulse detonator tuned to the command tower's AI. The entire room went dark. Lights died. Systems dropped. The ambient hum of the power core vanished into silence. Only the emergency glow from the window backlit them now, two shadows locked in the final moments of a forgotten war. Cothail hesitated. "What did you do?" "Cut the leash," Rourke replied. The nanites surged, amplifying his reflexes beyond safe limits. Pain spiked behind his eyes, but he pushed forward. Cothail raised his weapon, but Rourke was already inside his guard, jamming a secondary blade under the Overlord's arm. It pierced clean through muscle and armor. Cothail staggered back, blood spraying the floor. "You think this is vengeance?" he spat. "No." Rourke grabbed him by the throat. "This is message delivery." He slammed Cothail into the wall, crushing the display screens behind him. Glass and sparks exploded outward. "You thought you could erase us? Make us vanish? Kill us quietly? One by one?" Cothail coughed blood, eyes wide. "You didn't kill us. You taught us how to come back." Rourke drove the blade deep into the Overlord's chest. Cothail's body jerked once, then stilled. His lips parted, a final whisper catching in his throat. Rourke leaned in close. "You created this." He pulled the blade free. The body dropped. No ceremony. No last breath. Just the end. Rourke stood over the corpse, chest heaving. His vision blurred at the edges, heat, adrenaline, system overload. The nanites inside him pulsed erratically, struggling to stabilize his vitals. "Warning," the internal voice intoned. "Biochemical strain exceeding safe thresholds. Cellular damage accumulating." He ignored it. On the console nearby, a final signal blinked, an outbound distress ping from Cothail's personal channel. Still open. Still broadcasting. He accessed it. "This is Captain Elias Rourke," he said, voice ragged but firm. "To any Imperial commanders receiving this signal, your warden is dead. Your prison is ashes. And humanity remembers. He closed the transmission. The power grid began to collapse, cascading through the tower. The floor trembled beneath his feet. Flames surged from the vents. Distant explosions shook the structure. He turned, limped toward the lift shaft, and descended the emergency ladder. Below, the prison was chaos. Cells opened, alarms silenced, bodies in the corridors. But no one saw him. No one stopped him. He was already a ghost. The living just didn't know it yet. Smoke poured from the shattered ceiling of Zalvora Prime as Rourke stepped into the cooling corridor. Sparks crackled from the power lines overhead, illuminating the devastation he'd left behind. Blood smeared the walls. Doors hung open, scorched and torn. A siren blared weakly somewhere in the background, erratic, wounded, meaningless now. He moved with a limp. His leg had locked up midway through the descent, the nanites struggling to compensate. Vision flickered at the edges, white static clawing at his periphery. He blinked it away and pushed forward. The command tower had fallen. Cathael was dead. But the job wasn't done. A message had to remain. He turned a corner and found a security console still active, flickering under emergency power. With steady hands, he opened the access panel and pulled out a thermal cutter. In a few quick motions, he severed the safeties and rewired the uplink. The screen glowed bright. "Run external broadcast," he muttered. "Signal unstable," the internal system replied. "Bandwidth interference." "Force it." Static cleared. A red recording light blinked. He leaned in, blood staining the side of his neck. "This is Rourke," he said, voice like gravel dragged over steel. "Human designation, Black Op Protocol null. Message intended for all recipients with clearance above Tier 7. He paused, then continued. "You thought we were gone. You thought pain, silence, and fire would erase us. But we watched. We learned. You left us no room for peace, so we adapted to war." He looked into the lens. Not angry. Just done. "You didn't break us. You refined us." He ended the recording. Locked it into the console's backup feed. Routed it into the prison's planetary beacon. It would burn its way to the nearest relay node, transmitting across dozens of systems before the Empire could scrub it. Let them chase a ghost. He turned away and walked toward the holding level. Cells lined both walls, some open, others flickering, their locks fried from earlier sabotage. In the far corner, a sound, soft movement. He stepped closer. 3 prisoners stared through the warped bars. 2 human. 1 Varnari hybrid, thin and trembling. None spoke. Their eyes locked on him. "You're," one whispered. He said nothing. Just reached for the panel and overrode the cell door. It slid open with a struggling hiss. "Move," he said. The woman in front hesitated. "Who are you?" "Revenant." She swallowed, nodded. The 3 followed him, barely keeping pace. They reached a loading bay near the prison's far perimeter. The backup shuttles had been grounded, but the hangar had one ship untouched by the chaos, a courier vessel, small, fast, stripped of armament. Perfect. He keyed open the ramp. "You know how to fly this?" The older man nodded. "I can try." "Then go." The Varnari girl looked back. "You're not coming?" He stepped away from the ship. "I've got one last thing to do." The ramp closed. The engines fired. He watched the ship rise and vanish into the sky, cutting through the ash and smoke, leaving Zalvora behind. He turned toward the throne room one last time. Back inside, Cathael's body still lay crumpled where it had fallen. Rourke didn't look at it. He approached the center of the room, where the Empire's banner had once hung, a gleaming insignia of absolute control. He reached up, tore it down, and threw it across the floor. Then he etched 4 words into the wall behind the throne. No technology. No broadcast. Just a blade, and his hand. We do not die. Satisfied, he stepped away and opened the emergency exit hidden behind the main column. A narrow corridor led out of the command tower into a cavern beneath the fortress. a long-forgotten service tunnel once used to dump waste into space. A small craft waited there. Hidden. Silent. He boarded it. Link established. The voice in his mind said. Do you wish to report in? Patch through, he replied. A moment later, a signal clicked. A familiar tone buzzed in his ear. Commander Rourke? A voice said, clipped, formal. Female. Alive. Mission complete. Package delivered. Understood. Initiate return trajectory to Deep Station 6. He hesitated. Not yet. Sir? I'm rerouting. New objective. They'll expect me to run. I want them looking the wrong way. Silence. Then, acknowledged. Updating status to rogue operational. He closed the channel and activated the stealth drive. The ship lifted silently, disappearing into the debris-choked atmosphere. Far above, orbital satellites flickered as the prison's final broadcast reached them. In a quiet war room on Earth, 3 admirals watched the message play on a loop. No sound. Just the image of Rourke, bloodied, calm, resolute. One of them leaned forward. Phase 2 is active. The others nodded. The youngest among them, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, smiled faintly. They wanted to know what it would take to kill a human. Now they'll learn what happens when we stop trying to stay dead. The room went dark. The war had never really ended. And now, it was beginning again.